Hello everyone, welcome to Zoonosis with Joy. I'm Joy, and today we're going to be talking about irrational animal phobias. This is my 1000 subscriber special, so thank you all for subscribing. Your wonderful, beautiful comments, they've touched my heart and made me a little less cynical, hopefully. You'll see why this is my subscriber special in a little bit, but let's get to it. I have a lot of information to get through first. So what the heck is a phobia? Phobia just means fear, phobos, right? It's a kind of a Greek sort of term. But really, it's just an irrational fear towards an animal, especially one that's not presenting any immediate danger to you. Why do people develop these? I mean, some people are afraid of snakes, some are afraid of spiders, of bees, of dogs, of horses, of butterflies, all different kinds of animals that people can be afraid of. Well, one of the ideas seems to be that it's a form of maladaptive learning. Maladaptive means, learning gone wrong, basically, right? So if you think about classical conditioning and Pavlov, Pavlov's dogs were trained by associating the sound of a ringing bell with the presence of meat. This, presence of meat causes dogs to salivate, and Pavlov would cut the holes in the necks of dogs and basically put a cup there, collect the amount of spit, and yes. So don't think about that too much, but the ringing of the bell became enough to trigger salivation in these dogs, basically. And this seems to be what's happening with the generation of phobias, at least somewhat. So if you associate a negative feeling with a neutral stimulus, that neutral stimulus can elicit the negative feeling in the future. We begin to associate, the feeling of being afraid with the presence of the stimulus itself, right? So this can be basically reinforced through operant conditioning, right? So if you clicker train a dog, you'll know, you give them a reward every time they sit down and you put that to a command, they'll associate the command with the reward and they'll generate the behavior, basically. And this seems to also happen with phobias, right? So if you are rewarded every time you run away from a bee with a feeling of relief, well, what's going to happen next time you see a bee? You're going to run away. So there is this kind of reinforcement happening too. There also seems to be a form of vicarious learning. We often learn by observing other people, and this is something that's kind of unique to primates. We look at other primates and see what they're doing, and we can learn by doing that. Now, if everyone's screaming, pointing at the spider, then yeah, you're probably going to start feeling a phobia towards spiders because you've learned that spiders can be afraid. Something that generates fear. They can be dangerous. They can, get into your house. All these kind of negative feelings associated with them. But just like with any other kind of learning, they can go through extinction. They can go through desensitization. Over time, if you no longer have a negative reinforcer or the positive punishment that's associated with that neutral stimulus, you eventually forget. You forget why you were afraid of in the first place. So there seems to be an aspect of learning here, learning that's maladaptive. But that's not the full story. The evolutionary psychologists have an idea that there's some sort of level of innate fear, a kind of Darwinian evolution towards certain kinds of specific phobias. The two primary examples are snakes and spiders. So snakes are associated with venomous reptiles, but also large constrictor snakes. And these can be exceptionally dangerous for arboreal primates. Guess what? You're descended from arboreal primates. So they've done studies where they found that if they present juvenile, but not infant, primates to a presence of a snake, they will run away in fear. So there seems to be some level of genetic sort of imprinting of these kind of fears in our psyche. Spiders seem to be also very similar. Spiders are often venomous, or not often, but they're all technically venomous, but not many of them are actually that dangerous. But the association with venom and the fear of the spider means that people can kind of make that association before they even realize they've made that association. So there seems to be some level of evolutionary kind of coupling there. Now, that often leads to the accusation that these evolutionary biologists are kind of making a just so story. I think that's a valid criticism. There doesn't seem to be we haven't found the snake fear gene. We haven't found the spider fear gene. So it's unclear exactly where exactly this is being coded for or why or how this is transmitted. Maybe it's cultural knowledge that's so deep in the past that we just don't really know about it. For me, personally, I'm not that afraid of snakes. I own a snake. It lives in my house. I love spiders I let them live in my house, and they eat the flies. I like them for that. So Clearly that this isn't enough to maintain or produce a phobia, and many people can overcome any kind of innate sort of fears they have towards these animals. There's also some wackier ideas, and I kind of want to present to this because, well, why not? This one's actually kind of interesting though. Environment, right? We live in urban civilization, many of us, right? So cities, suburbs, that kind of thing, where there's not a lot of natural spaces. And if you're separated from the animals that live in those natural spaces, you may develop almost like an allergic reaction. Your behavioral immune system is no longer sufficient to detect the difference between threat and not threat. So it overreacts basically to keep you safe from these big threats in your environment. You see a spider, you don't see spiders normally, and this could be something that's dangerous or not. We don't really care. You need to get it out of your house, right? So the behavioral system goes haywire. It's like an allergy, right? Normally, you're not in the presence of pollen and dander and all those kind of things, but when they're around, it makes your, sinuses swell and your skin go itchy and all these different kinds of things. Same might apply for phobias, right? You're not usually seeing bats in your house, but when you see one, it makes your brain go, wah! So there seems to be something going on there too. And finally, the wackiest one, I think, this is actually Desmond Morris's sort of idea in The Naked Ape. This is an old book now, but I read this when I was a kid, and it was in my grandma's house. So his idea is that it's psychosexual. A lot of these animal phobias may have some developmental link, right? Boys and girls, both pre- and post-pubescent, seem to have a deep fear of snakes. And what do snakes look like? I'm not going to say it, but it's got kind of this venomous phallic sort of energy, and that seems to be part of the idea. His idea about spiders is even funnier. There's some studies that suggest that women, especially post-pubescent girls, are extremely afraid of spiders. And the number one thing they associate with spiders is that they're creepy and hairy. Do you see where I'm going with this? He thinks that it's related to the pubis and the hair, and that it looks like a walking bush, basically. So I don't know what to make of that kind of idea. It has some certain kind of perverse sort of Freudian logic to it, but on its own may not be sufficient to explain animal phobias. What's happening when we're feeling a phobia? Well, if you think about it, we have a threat detection and kind of a fear arousal system in our brain called the limbic system. Especially the amygdala seems to be really strongly associated with these feelings of fear and panic. What happens is if you perceive a threat in your environment, the amygdala goes, hello, we need to do something about it. It activates the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is like, yeah, I agree. There's something that we need to be worried about here. And what can happen is that this stimulates a feeling, stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, freeze, and fornicate. It is activated during periods of stress and arousal, and it often produces feelings of high heart rate, high respiratory rate. It opens up your bronchioles, it dilates your pupils, it makes you sweat. It causes your digestion to slow down and the secretion of your mouth to slow down. All these different stress responses, they come rushing at you with the catecholamines such as norepinephrine and epinephrine. That's noradrenaline or adrenaline, that kind of thing. So you get this literal adrenaline rush when you are in a state of distress or panic. And this can be associated with these negative stimuli. So you see the stimuli in your environment, which could be anything, if you have a pre-existing sort of fear towards it, and that can produce a feeling of panic. So that's what's happening. But how do you stop it? Well, most people with animal phobias don't do anything about it. They live their entire lives with an irrational fear that doesn't seem to help them at all. This is because, partly it's because, you can just avoid a spider or a snake, that kind of thing, and you never really have to worry about it. It's just something that you keep off to the side. There's also the fact that you feel uncomfortable even broaching the topic, right? Some people will move out of their house if they find a spider, or they won't live in certain places because they have more snakes, or they won't go to certain countries. They start limiting their behavior to not even have to think or address about the problem. And then that can limit and restrict and reinforce other kinds of fears they have and become even more irrational. And this could be a really big problem if you're trying to live in a world that's diverse and full of new and weird and interesting things, if you're suddenly putting the brakes on new experiences and new kinds of information. So that's a big problem. There's also the fact that it can be linked to different kinds of prejudices and fears. So we don't really want to live with those in our lives if we can help it. That said, only about 10 to 25% of people with animal phobias or any kind of specific phobias actually seek help with it, right? A lot of people just either deal with it on their own or they live with it. One of the best ways to actually face these kind of phobias is through exposure therapy. Generally starting with kind of small amounts of stimulus. You look at a picture book or a YouTube video, and then you slowly get more and more and more exposure. Some people just like to dive straight into it, feet first, sink or swim. That's also a way to do it if you think you can do it safely, basically. If you're gonna run across the road at the sight of something, maybe start with something a little slower, right? I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I can't tell you exactly how to face your fears or deal with your mommy issues, whatever. But but you could at least talk to a professional about these kind of problems if you're having them too. There's also learning, and learning can also be an antidote to fear. So if you become aware of something and you are approaching it from a place of curiosity and respect, you're much less likely to get that emotional reaction. If you're kind of cerebral like I am, you often think about something, it actually can help disarm your prejudices and your biases towards that. So now, all that being said, this is all very egg-headed. Why am I making this my subscriber video, a 1,000 subscriber special? Well, I love animals. I have had animals my entire life. Ever since I was 5 years old, I've had birds. I've had rodents. I have rabbits. I have reptiles. I have snakes. I've handled tarantulas. I've worked as a zookeeper. I went to vet school, I became a veterinarian, I work with animals every single day, I deal with all the big scary German shepherds, I've looked face to face in the eyes of angry big cats and bears and all different kinds of animals. But there is one animal that fills me with a feeling of dread and fear. And it's the butterflies, it's the moths. I'm a lepidopterophobe. I have this intense feeling of distress and panic when I'm presented with one of the most harmless and innocuous creatures you could possibly think of. And I don't know when this started. I remember, I guess when I was 10 years old, there was a family friend who was a butterfly collector, and they gave me a book, and it was full of these big moths, and I felt the fear prickling down my spine, looking at these alien wings and these faces and this perverse sort of organism, which doesn't look like any other kind of living thing. Some of them don't even have mouths, right? I mean, how could you be afraid of an animal that can't even bite you? It can't do anything to you, really. They're completely harmless. They don't carry any diseases. And yet, from a young age, I have felt a very strong fear. Now, you could look towards this. I don't really know when this sort of association started. Maybe I was born with it. Maybe I kind of developed it over time. Maybe it's linked to this weird psychosexual stuff. I mean, these are animals associated with transition and change. Maybe there's something to that there. But there's also something to be said of maybe it's just something that I've picked up. It's just flotsam and jetsam, anxiety, that kind of thing. We don't really know. These kind of evolutionary biology sort of things, learning psychosexual environment, maybe it's just an environmental allergy I have to not being outside enough as a kid. Maybe I spent too much time reading books and looking at the computer, and I just never developed a proper appreciation for nature. That seems unlikely. I mean, I spent a lot of time growing up outside, and yet I developed this. I have a few ideas of why they particularly bother me, but none of them are really, comprehensive. One of them is that they don't obey my airspace. I have a little airspace here. If someone puts their hands right above my peripheral vision, I kind of freak out and shrink away. They don't respect the fact that I have boundaries. They land on you, they touch you, and this feeling of being touched really bothers me, especially if no one asks permission first. How can they ask permission? They're just butterflies, they don't know any better. Tell me that, I guess. They also have weird eye spots, and they kind of stare at you, and I don't like being stared at, which is ironic because I make a YouTube channel, so I don't really know what to make of that. But all that being said, I realize that this is a completely irrational thing, and that this has negative implications for my ability to advocate for their conservation. Butterflies are important pollinator species. They're everywhere, right? And they're really under threat from habitat destruction, from neonicotinoid insecticides, from all different kinds of ways that humans are monocropping their environment and destroying the habitats in which these butterflies live. And they're quite beautiful and intricate and delicate animals. They can't fight back. They can't attack you. So I decided I'm just going to go deal with this. I'm going to go expose myself to the butterflies and deal with it. I'll show you how I managed to do that. So I'm actually in a gallery looking at some dead butterflies and moths, which are a little easier for me. But even like if you look at some of the ones behind me there, like some of the larger ones are already making me feel a little bit of that sympathetic reaction, the release of catecholamines like epinephrine, norepinephrine, and that feeling of panic. So we'll have to see how this looks like when we're dealing with the live specimens. I definitely had a moment of like fluttering, so to speak, in my chest when I saw some of the ones in the container. I'll take a video of that in here. So I just about like panicked when I saw these ones in here because I thought they were live, but nope, these are just some moon moths. There's some polyphemus moths, I think, in there. They look very lively, but they are pinned insects, and so yeah, even the dead specimens can still elicit a feeling of fear, even if it's completely irrational. And there's no way these things could hurt me. I mean, they're obviously dead, but the limbic system doesn't exactly picky about that sort of thing. Look at that. It's incredible, but a little unnerving. Okay, so I'm in the butterfly house right now, and I'm absolutely 100% terrified. I've been ducking and weaving and dodging as they've been flying around my head. There's a bunch of them feeding right now, so it looks like they're feeding on some fruits for the sugars. So you can kind of see that their eye spot coloration and plus the bright starting in blue, it fills me with a feeling of deep and sublime terror, which is quite interesting. It's quite beautiful. Wow. I just rest. So it's taking me a lot of like self-control and actually a lot of patience not to have a panic attack right now, but I'm really like around. You can see tons of tropical plants. Like the sheer number of butterflies in this area is just incredible, but it's a little alarming because I have to walk through here. And I'm worried that they're going to touch me. I mean, they'll probably land on me at some point, and I'll have to fight every single urge to brush them off. But, yeah, this is quite cool. So it's just so many beautiful butterflies, and realizing it's in a safe, controlled environment, they're not going to hurt me at all. They're completely harmless animals. They can't even bite me if they land on me. And yet, when they're flying close to my head, my brain does not compute that at all. So, overcoming this kind of limbic system and my natural prejudice against these rather harmless and quite beautiful animals is very important. Look at that. I just want you to appreciate how many butterflies there actually are in here. The longer I've stood in here, the easier it has become to gradually adapt and to lower that panic threshold, or raise the panic threshold, I should say. I believe these two are mating. Good for them. It's a little hetero for my taste, but I can't judge. I have to say, given that the more time I'm in here, the less afraid I am, and it seems very ridiculous that I had any kind of fear of these things at all. So I would say exposure therapy works, and maybe that the way forward is that I'll have a deeper appreciation for these beautiful and precious animals. So pretty cool. These are that. This is. So I'm standing inside of a butterfly house, and probably for the first time in my life, I'm not feeling a deep sense of terror and dread, so mission accomplished, I think. Sometimes they fly right past my head, and I get a little spooked, but more just the peripherals. When it gets into my peripheral vision, that seems to be when it's worse. But this is a pretty controlled environment, and you know, even, I think, this is probably as bad as it would ever get in terms of the number of butterflies, the size of the butterflies, and what sort of butterflies I would encounter. The butterflies in my region are much smaller than this, so these are all tropical, quite large species. So I feel a lot happier and a lot safer knowing, like, they're harmless. Why was I ever afraid of them? Anyway. So yeah, I think I'm cured? I'm not cured, but it definitely feels a lot easier now. Yeah, like, you know, there's a uneasiness there, but compared to what it was before, it doesn't seem quite as bad. So, you know, face your fears. You may find you like it. I mean, this is quite a beautiful place, and I like seeing the beautiful tropical butterflies. They're everywhere around me right now. They're flying around my head. I really am not that afraid of them. Like, they're just kind of existing, right? They're just trying to screw and drink nectar. I mean, who doesn't like that? So, as you can see, exposure therapy does work. You can overcome your fears. You can face those sort of things. And you can see how these kind of stimuli can be extinct in real time, right? It just takes the right kind of exposure and the right kind of things. You need to always be kind of pushing the limits of what you know or what you're comfortable with. Otherwise, you're going to be trapped in cages of anxiety your entire life. And I don't want to live my life that way. I want to keep learning and growing and doing new things and meeting new people. So if I'm afraid of simple, harmless things, what if I'm afraid of doing things that are riskier? And I think that this is a huge, important step for me, but maybe I can help other people too with these kind of feelings. So that's all I have for now. Hopefully you got something from this video. I want to thank everyone who's been a supporter of me, both on this YouTube channel and elsewhere. And I really appreciate your kind comments, sharing my videos around, subscribing. I really like learning with y'all, and I like making these videos, and it's really helpful for me to learn and grow. I'm hoping that, you know, we'll get more subscribers in the future. Maybe you know, I'm going to keep making them because people keep watching them. So, you know, eventually, one day that might change. But, you know, for now, I really appreciate all the support. Definitely check out my course this summer of 2025, Domestication Syndrome, or watch my past courses at the Mimbri School. I'll put a link for that in the description. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope everyone overcomes their fears and has a good time this beautiful spring and summer. Peace.
Oh, found a chrysalid. Got a scavenge.